Hello, this is Distracted Lord, and welcome back to Forza Horizon 4, and I'm going to be taking some more cars around my circuit thing. So we're starting off with the Vauxhall Corsa VXR, and a ton of lag as well, which is wonderful. For some reason, my game doesn't like free roam. This is front wheel drive. It's not the least powerful thing ever. It has 610 BI, so it's about the same as the rest of them. So here is the best lap of the Corsa, and there are probably some people out there who go, yeah, it's a Corsa, it probably doesn't turn very well. And you would be surprised to know that it turns very well and is not particularly fast in a straight line, although that may not be particularly surprising. It's actually a surprisingly quick car. It's actually really surprisingly quick. But it doesn't actually understeer as much as you think it might. In fact, sometimes it even oversteers. And it's a interesting car to drive, because you don't use all the power through the corners as well. Like in rear-wheel drive cars, you don't want to use the power because you go sideways, and if you don't use the power, otherwise you just don't turn. But that's understeer for you. So I was gonna say something, and I have forgotten what it was. Oh, I remember. So what I was doing to try and solve the AI problem last episode was I was giving the AI time to drive away, but unfortunately I did catch up to them. So for this episode I have come up with a better solution, which is that I set the AI to absolutely incompetent difficulty, and then I just race with them, overtake them all by the second corner, and then that's fine. And they're out of the way and didn't really affect anything else. So that works better than what I was doing last episode. But what I normally do is the first lap, I drive the car and I see how fast I think I can get it round the corners. And then the second lap, I try and get a good solid lap that I know is hopefully a good time, and then for the next laps I just drive the car harder and harder and try and get a better lap than before, but often like the 4th or 5th lap end in me not going as fast because I was too wide out of corners and all that sort of stuff. And yes, I did get that checkpoint, and no, I didn't use rewinds to get it. So this car, however, I think, like the Quattro, I think it was the second lap, I think the Porsche was the 3rd lap maybe, but this thing, I went around the second lap, I got quite a not bad time, and then I did the 3rd lap, and I drove it a bit harder, and I went a bit faster, and then the 4th lap I drove it a bit harder again, and it went even faster. This is that 4th lap. I drove it harder, I pushed it round the corners more, and it just went faster. It didn't try and kill me and throw me at a wall, it just drove faster. And for those of you who don't like front wheel drive out there, well, guess what Forza Horizon 4 does, and this car is now in 1st place. It got a 3:34.929, which is 2 seconds ahead of the Quattro, and does maths, 5 seconds ahead of the 911, which is surprisingly, you'd have thought the Quattro would have done better, but turns out VXR know what they're doing. Now I have a Ford F-150 Raptor. It's a big off-road pickup thing, and it's not exactly designed for a tarmac thing. Although, I'm not entirely sure about that, because it does seem to have a slight identity crisis and not quite be able to tell whether it's supposed to be an off-roader or an SUV. It does seem to be a little confused as to what it's trying to be, but it's more understeery than the VXR, which is kind of surprising, being this is four-wheel drive and that was front-wheel drive. This thing it actually doesn't handle too bad. It's not particularly fast in a straight line. It has 10 gears, even though it only ever uses 6 of them, because it literally, on the gearing chart being in the tuning menu, just 7, 8, 9, 10 are just not on the chart. They're just not there. Not quite sure why they exist. Probably some reason that I don't know about, but it doesn't handle too badly. It is quite heavy. It doesn't stop particularly well, as you can see, and it is a bit, the handling, it's quite grippy because it has quite big tyres, because it's Horizon 4, it has big tyres, but then that means grip. It's not too underpowered. It's better on the dirt than the tarmac, really, because on the dirt it can use its grip and its suspension. On the tarmac it's just not really powerful enough. It does slide a bit if you're Scandinavian flick it or something, or you handbrake it. If you don't, you just understeer. It's not the best for actual lap time. It's not the worst either, though. So it's kind of medium, slightly bottom end of medium. But as you can see, it doesn't particularly care about street furniture. It just sort of goes straight through it, and the suspension doesn't particularly care about bumpy dirt roads. It just goes through it. And then you get to a flat bit and it just goes slowly. But it just doesn't particularly care about the street furniture. It just goes through it. And we come up to the corner and we go around it and take out the sign. No problem. Doesn't matter. The hill, it's not too bad. It's four-wheel drive, it has big tyres, it's not the grips that's the problem, it's more the power to weight ratio that's the problem for it getting up the hill. Everything has a downside to everything has a problem getting up the hill in some way or another. This is power to weight ratio. So it goes into 3rd place. It beats the 911, but it's not as good as the Quattro or the VXR. It got a 3:37.691, which is not a bad time. It's about a second slower than the Quattro. It's surprisingly close, although I guess they are very similar PI. It's like 20 PI separating all 4 of the cars. That is intentional. I have intentionally picked cars that are very similar PI. So we've had a front-wheel drive, a four-wheel drive, and now we're going to have something that is neither of those and is a little older. And the third vehicle that I have brought, it's a Corvette. It's an old 60s Corvette Stingray. I think it's 427. It's not that great, I'm gonna be honest. It understeers a bit, it oversteers a lot, it has a fantastic back window. I mean, that is an amazing back window, but it looks cool. It's a Stingray, I love Stingrays, but it doesn't particularly drive that well. It doesn't turn very sharply at all, because it understeers and oversteers. If you're using any power at all, you just have the oversteer. If you're not using power, then you have understeer. As you can see, there's a bit of sliding involved. it's kind of fast in a straight line. Not too bad. But because it's an old muscle car, it has quite wallowy suspension. There's quite a lot of suspension travel, and just driving down an ordinary road uses it, which means that it can kind of cope with the dirt. Being rear-wheel drive and quite heavy, it doesn't particularly put its power down very well, but it's better than, say, if it were on race suspension. It still didn't do very well overall at all. First car to get into the 340s, but I mean it's quite fun to drive. It likes to move around a bit, and putting the power down on dirt is an interesting experience. As you can see, dirt is just slide all the time mode. Like, I'm trying to not slide it around, but it just slides around all the time. It is one of the lower PIs of all the cars that I've taken, but the Corsa was lower PI than it, which just shows how little PI actually matters really, because this car has done significantly worse than something which had less PI than it. But yeah, you just can't go around the corners with any sort of speed in this thing. It's just not an option. You just have to brake for the corners and drive around them without really putting any power down. But up the hill, it does wheel spin a little bit up the hill, but it's not that powerful, so it's not too bad. Also, the suspension helps it keep traction. It keeps what little traction it has with its suspension. It doesn't really have much traction to start with on the dirt, so it's not that great really, but it's alright on tarmac. It's alright. It could be worse. Let's go with that. It could be worse, but not by that much, as it did get a 3:43.988. That's pretty much just, yeah, that's 10 seconds behind the leader. Although that is still quite close. The leader is Vauxhall, but that's quite close, really. So here is a score table. The Corsa is in first place. It's the lowest PI car. Then the Audi Quattro in second. It's the second lowest PI car. And that trend seems to continue. Of the more PI you have, the worse you go, other than the Corvette. More PI equals more lap time, which is probably not what you were expecting. I have also just noticed that there is slight inconsistency in my formatting. Hang on. Right, there you go, that's better. Now it's all formatted the same way. The Corsa, you may have thought it would do badly. No, it's done very well. The Quattro has obviously done well. The Raptor seems to have liked it. It turns out that the rear-wheel drive cars are really not doing well around here. Either that or I'm just really not good at driving them. One of the two. But that is going to be it for this video, so thank you for watching. Don't get distracted, go subscribe now, and until next time, goodbye.